Hello and welcome to On Air with me, Muralee Nair. Today I'm joined by Suresh Rajan in Perth, Australia. Welcome, Suresh.
Yeah, nice to be here. Nice to join you on this podcast.
Suresh, you've had a role of 50 years in public policy.
Hmm.
When I look at your resume, I think it's people service more than public service because you've done a whole spectrum of things from policy making
Hmm.
right down to the coalface. How has that journey been for you, and what motivated you?
Yeah, look, it's a fascinating journey because I look back over those 50 years of being in WA, being in Perth, and I started out actually as an accountant, and I did my Bachelor of Commerce degree at UWA, then did my Master's in Business Administration, whilst working in the taxation office. And whilst working in the taxation office, I came to understand a little bit about difference and how people interact and about achieving equity amongst all of our different community groups that are in existence. And as human beings, we all exhibit these different characteristics. So it began to resonate with me that I felt that I was a very lucky person. My parents were reasonably well to do, we'd achieved all this. My dad had been a school teacher in Brunei, in Christmas Island, in Singapore, and was teaching here. And we really had a good life. And through that, I just felt there were lots of other people out there who weren't able to achieve for different reasons what they wanted to achieve. Sometimes they were being held back because they were not of the mainstream. They were not people who fitted into that white Anglo-Celtic paradigm that we have in Australia, or they weren't. They were people who had different sexual orientation, or they had disabilities. I began to think about what it was that these things really meant for them. And I recall my father always saying to me, if you think of society as a strata, a building block there, at the very, very top of that strata is the community. That's who's out there. The next level down is the family, and the next level down is you as an individual. So, if for whatever reason you're in trouble, for whatever reason you're not able to achieve the best, you're going to turn to the community for help because the chances are your family is also struggling because you can't provide for them. So if you're going to turn to the community for help, then everything you do today must be for the community first, because you need to empower the community so that if you need any assistance, you can turn to that community that you've empowered to be able to help you. Dad was a very forward thinking person. You know, we come from and if you boil it down to looking at the caste system in India, for example, we come from the Menon caste. And the Menons and the Nairs are considered to be the Kshatriyas, the warriors, the second level down from the priest. But Dad did not want to identify with that as his caste name. So he removed Menon from his surname, and we take his first name as our surname. So we don't recognize the caste system. We don't. Dad never did. Even as a child, he was always, yes, his family had servants who looked after them, but he would bring the servants home for dinner. He would bring them over, and then when he went to Brunei, he sent money so that the children of those servants could go to school rather than be servants to us. So he was very much a forward thinker, person who always thought in those terms. And I think he inculcated a lot of that in us. My brother, two sisters, and I, we all believe, and mum as well, all have a firm belief that we work for the community. Our life is about making sure that the community is organized, making sure that the community is well empowered to deal with all the issues it needs to, because ultimately it is people, it is community that will achieve everything we need to achieve.
Suresh, very interesting
Hmm.
take on the way
Hmm.
those who are more privileged look at serving the
Hmm.
community. But the question that I have is, in a world that's more individual
Hmm.
centric, does it still apply, or is it just a small percentage of people who are motivated this way?
Hmm. I suspect that it is a small percentage, and that's the unfortunate thing. But I take a lot of comfort from uh, Dr. Cornell Wilde, who is a chap who was in America, and he was a very, very dear friend of Martin Luther King, and he was there during all of the struggles of the black movement in America. He came to Perth and he asked to meet with me, and I met with him. He'd read some of my articles somewhere, and he asked to meet with me, and I was more than I was more than happy to meet with him. Connell West, sorry, and Connell said to me, "I noticed that you advocate for refugees." I said, "Yes." "And you advocate for LGBTIQ people." "Yes." "And you advocate for the culturally and linguistically diverse people." "Yes." "And you advocate for disabled people?" I said, "Yes." And he said, "Now let me tell you why I advocate for all of those groups. What's the one thing they have in common? They are all people, and you love people as I do." So he said, "That's what comes across. You love people. You don't see anyone as being different because they happen to have a particular characteristic." So he said, "That's what motivates you." And I spent a lot of my time trying to get people to think along those lines. So when we had 9/11, there was a huge backlash against the Muslims. And I spent a lot of time in community trying to educate people that the basic tenets of Islam, the basic tenets of Hinduism, and the basic tenets of Christianity and all other religions were exactly the same. They were all built around community, they were built around people. And if we can get everyone to start thinking along those lines, and I can show to people the color of my skin does not determine who I am. The fact that I am Hindu born doesn't determine who I am. It is me as a human being that determines where I'm going to be, what I'm going to do. And I think a lot of this came to the fore really after I got, quite sick some years ago and contemplated the reality that I was going to die fairly soon. No one expected that I would survive more than about 6 months back then. It's now 14 years, and I'm still here, and I'm still preaching the same thing. But it brought the frailty of the human element to me, and I started to think about what it is I can do to assist others a lot more. And I'd already done it peripherally and done it in little bits, but I really threw myself into it back then because I thought I don't have a lot of time. I need to do it quickly. I ended up being on about 38 different boards because I was so determined to make a difference in this area, that area, and so on. And that's just stayed with me ever since.
Suresh, one question that
Hmm.
has always sort of been on my mind is that into volunteering or
Hmm. Time.
giving time to whether it's advocacy or in the spirit of generous
Hmm.
volunteering, you need to have a mind and stomach
Hmm.
for it. Now, how would you advise young people? And many have approached me since I started this podcast, like, how do I give back?
Hmm.
How do I identify myself as this person who has the capacity to give in this area or that area? Do you have any help for them?
Yeah, look, my view has always been that every one of us has the capacity to advocate, whether it's in the wider sphere or whether it's in your family or whether it's just amongst your friends. We all have the capacity to advocate, but it is to think of everything in human rights terms. I don't look at people in prison as being people who have offended, therefore not entitled to human rights. The very first case that I dealt with post 9/11 was a chap in our prison system who wasn't given halal food, and he was of Islamic faith. And I thought, why is this even an issue? When I went to the Department of Justice, the backlash in the community against me was enormous because they kept saying that that man is an offender. He's lost his right to human rights. No, he hasn't. He has, when you define it as human rights, it's not talking about non-prisoner rights or people in the community rights. It's talking about a human being, and he doesn't lose that status of being a human being just because he happens to be in jail. So once you get your mind around that and start thinking of, and I always personalize it. If I was in that position, what would I want to do? I would want for someone to stand by my side and assist me. So, therefore, as soon as I see someone, I never turn away from somebody who needs assistance. Good example, I was writing the state disability strategy. So, the 2020-2030 strategy. I formed a committee of people with disability, and I chaired that, and we wrote the whole strategy for the government. In order to understand what it was that certain groups needed from that strategy, I went out and slept in the streets with the homeless community for a week. I wandered around East Perth. I wandered around with these people all night, um, just to understand what it was like for them and putting myself in their position. And all of a sudden, I began to think, yes, they need this, they need that, they need access to Centrelink, which we don't give if you don't have an address. So all of those things started to be things that I can advocate for. Probably the most celebrated case that I did of recent times was Aishwarya's case. Aishwarya was the little girl who died here in Perth at Perth Children's Hospital. I was never going to, I never met her. I only knew her after her death. But I put myself in the position of her parents, of having taken my children to Perth Children's Hospital on many occasions, and tried to think, how would I have reacted if I had been accorded the treatment that she was? Tomorrow, I'm going to Perth Children, no, to King Edward Hospital to meet with a family who's struggled with some issues around and had a very traumatic childbirth. Now, I'm never going to have to go through that myself, but I can understand now as a patient what she would have expected and what she didn't receive. I'm dealing with a few deaths in the hospital system. They all happen to be from our community, which worries me greatly. So I'm meeting with the Director General next week to find out what it is that we're doing wrong here in our system that is causing so many people of Indian origin to end up dying in our health system. Why? I gave evidence at the coroner's inquest not long ago into Shandipan's death, and I made the point, from our culture, you don't go and question authority. So when someone says to you, someone will be with you soon, and 4 hours later, no doctor has come to see you, and your child has deteriorated over that time, it's worry. But you cannot predicate a health system on how loudly the parent yells at the counter. So you've got to predicate the health system on the basis that whether you yell or not, you're going to get the same service. You're going to get the best service available. So I guess it's thinking about, you know, it's that phrase they use in most Western society, there but for the grace of God. There but for the grace of God go I. So if I was in that position, what will I need to do to get out of that position? What do I need to access? I need to access assistance. Someone like me who's been around here for 50 years, and has a reasonable year of government because of the work I did in media. Now, I've worked in media for the better part of 25 years, 30 years. Did radio and all that for a long time. So very comfortable in media and very able to put matters across easily. So I found that it was because I've got the year of government because of that media background. I can do that. Often I say to people, if you want to be noticed, write a letter to the newspaper about your experience. I get published probably once a week on matters that matter to me, but I'm surprised that when I put it out into newspapers, all of a sudden I have a whole host of people saying, oh, that matters to me as well. So it's very easy to get involved with advocacy. It just requires us to start thinking about us as one part of a whole, and we will contribute to make that whole so empowered, so inclusive that we don't need government assistance for anything. We will achieve it ourselves as a community.
Suresh, you've made a very, very strong case for advocacy, for people to step into the role, and you've put it very, very eloquently. I'm very grateful for that. And I'm sure we have listeners who are very grateful to that because there are many who are at the edge, but perhaps just daren't take that
Yes,
one
don't
step
take that.
further.
That first step is not a difficult step because really, when you boil it down to what would I want from that position, then it makes it a lot easier. All you're doing is expressing your view about what's good for you, and you'll be surprised. It may be good for someone else as well. So that's all it is. So, yep, and I desperately need people to pick up and run with it because I'm not getting any younger and I'm not going to be around to do this for much longer. So I need people to pick up and say, I'll do that. I'm happy
So,
for them to contact me.
would you say just two things?
Hmm.
Humanize the problem
Yep.
and personalize the problem so you know what exactly it is.
Yeah, look, personalized. I mean, none of us, I keep coming back to that point that no one knows us better than us. You know, it's not the doctors, it's not the people at the hospital. It's me who knows what's happening in my body, and it's me who knows what I need. Therefore, personalize every issue down to what would it mean if I was dealing with that issue? How would I deal with it? And then offer an opinion to that effect. It works every time.
Suresh Rajan, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure talking with you.
Thank you, Muralee.
Thank you
Much
very much.
appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And to our listeners, this is Muralee signing off from On Air together with my producers Tenzin and Lakshima. Thank you, Suresh, once again.
Much
And
appreciated.
thank you till the next time.
Like, comment, and subscribe.